They chuckled while scraping my roast chicken straight into the trash. The one I'd spent hours preparing. Seasoned just right, basted with lemon and rosemary the way my husband, Frank, always loved it. No offense, Grandma, Nicole smirked, but we already ordered Thai. I stood there holding the empty platter, my hands shaking a little. Not because of age, something colder than that. From the living room, their laughter carried on. It never stopped these days. They hadn't noticed when I stopped setting the table weeks ago. Didn't care when I stopped joining them for meals. I turned into part of the furniture. Quiet, still easy to ignore. I carried the dish back into the kitchen, each step heavier than the last. I said nothing. Not yet. I washed it carefully the way my mother taught me. Scalding water, steady hands. The smell of roasted garlic clung to the air like memory. I opened the little window above the sink, letting in a dry, warm August breeze. My garden outside, at least that still belonged to me. They hadn't taken that. Not yet. Upstairs, a door slammed, probably Ryan or Luke, my grandsons 17 and 15. Neither had looked me in the eye in months, buried instead in their phones, headphones sealing them off, becoming strangers before my eyes. I dried my hands on an old tea towel, the one with faded tulips and a burn mark from when Frank once left the stove on. He called those marks battle scars, the little proofs of life. Frank would have had something to say about tonight. But he'd been in the ground 5 years now, and silence was all I had left to speak for me. Their voices filled the hallway as I climbed the stairs. I caught Nicole cracking a joke about my cooking, something about World War II food. Daniel, my son, didn't defend me. Just a shallow chuckle. Not real laughter, more like permission. My room smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The bed was neatly made, always was. The only place left that was mine. I sat on the edge and picked up the photo of Frank tucked into the mirror's frame. His smile still looked like comfort. Like truth. You wouldn't have let this happen, I whispered. You'd have said something. But he wasn't here and I was tired of talking to pictures. I opened the drawer beside the bed and pulled out the thick envelope I hadn't touched since February. The deed. The one they never once asked about. The one I never offered. Tomorrow morning, before anyone stirred, I'd be gone. They thought they could treat me like a ghost. They'd forgotten whose name was still on this house. I didn't sleep that night. Not from nerves, those had long ago burned out, but from a deeper stillness, the kind that comes before a storm or after a final choice has been made. I sat by the window watching the porch light sputter and die. It had been flickering for weeks. Daniel kept saying he'd fix it. He never did. At dawn I dressed slowly. Gray slacks, a crisp blouse, and the cardigan Frank always said looked good on me. I combed my thinning hair, twisted it into a bun, pinned it like I had when I was 20. Today I would not look invisible. The house was silent. No footsteps overhead. No dishes clattering in the kitchen. My bag was already packed, papers, IDs, the old key ring they didn't know I still had. I paused at the dining room. The table was littered with greasy takeout bags, half-empty cups. My serving platter was gone. Maybe they'd tossed it too. Part of me hoped they had. Let them be thorough in their disregard. I left a short note on the fridge. Out for the day. Don't wait up. That would be the last time I signed anything in that house. The morning air smelled like dirt and rain. My knees ached going down the steps, but I didn't falter. My old sedan waited at the curb, dented but faithful. I drove past the bakery that used to know my order, past the school where Daniel scraped his knee in 3rd grade. The neighborhood hadn't changed, only the people. The lawyer's office was above a shuttered pharmacy in a brick building. I'd made the appointment 2 weeks after Frank's funeral, but never followed through. Then the boys lost another job, Nicole wanted to redecorate, and Daniel said, just until we get back on our feet. So I moved in. That was 4 years ago. Mrs. Turner, the secretary, greeted me kindly. He's ready for you. Mr. Miller looked older than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly now. Good to see you again, he said. You brought the deed? I handed over the envelope without a word. He unfolded the papers, eyes scanning. Still in your name. Fully. Frank never added anyone else. They don't know that, I told him. He raised his eyebrows. They just assume the house is Daniel's because they live there. Because I let them. But assumptions aren't ownership. Mr. Miller nodded slowly. And you're ready to transfer sell reclaim? I'm ready, I said. Draft a notice effective immediately. They've got 30 days to leave. Make it official. From you, not me. He hesitated. You're sure? I held his gaze. They laughed as they threw my dinner in the garbage. That was enough. He began typing. Later I walked 2 blocks to the bank. Closed the joint account Daniel insisted on for convenience. Opened a new one in my name alone. Changed the beneficiary on my life insurance. Left nothing to chance. By noon the sky had gone dark. I stood outside the notary's office, the stamped papers in my hand. Legal. Binding. They wouldn't see this coming. And maybe that was the saddest part because I'd let them believe for years they were entitled. They forgot I still had teeth. I just bared them. I remembered the first day I carried my suitcase into Daniel's house. They all smiled then. I remember it clear as yesterday. Nicole touched my arm and said, "You'll always have a place here." I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. Frank had been gone 6 months, and my own house felt too heavy, too silent. So when Daniel said, "Mom, come stay with us. It'll be easier," I packed what I thought I'd need and locked my door behind me. Nicole had the guest room ready. Fresh sheets, lavender candles, a knitted throw folded neatly at the foot of the bed. "You'll be comfortable," she promised. The boys carried my boxes upstairs, laughing loud like it was some celebration. Daniel even opened a bottle of wine that night, and we sat around the table swapping stories about Frank. I thought maybe grief had brought me back my family, but comfort has a way of souring. The guest room never stayed mine. The lavender candles vanished after a week. The throw ended up in the living room. My space shrank little by little. At first it was just my things being moved without asking. Then Nicole started knocking once before barging in. Sometimes not even that. "We're all family," she'd say like that excused it. Meals changed too. At first I cooked the way Frank loved. Roast stews, fresh bread. Everyone praised it. Then Nicole began sighing. Too heavy, too old-fashioned. Soon I was told to rest while she cooked. Her meals came from jars, boxes, takeout bags. But Daniel nodded along, grateful not to argue. The boys stopped sitting with me after dinner. They'd disappear upstairs, laughter trailing down the hall. Once I followed, hoping maybe they wanted me close. Found the door shut in my face. Headphones clamped tight. My life shrank to quiet corners. Tea at the window in the mornings. Folding laundry that wasn't mine in the afternoons. Listening to muffled voices through the walls at night. No one was cruel, not at first. Just small exclusions stacking up like bricks. When I suggested going back to my old church, Daniel said, "It's too far, Mom. No need for the drive." When I bought a new cardigan, Nicole muttered, "What a waste." When I asked about going to Ryan's game, Luke laughed. "Grandma, you wouldn't get it." They thought I didn't notice. That old age had dulled me. But I noticed everything. One night, washing dishes, I saw my reflection in the dark kitchen window. My face looked back, smaller, faded somehow. That was when I realized I hadn't just moved in. I'd handed over my life piece by piece. And they'd taken it without question. Still, I told myself they mean well. They're just busy. Things will get better. Took years. And one cruel laugh over my ruined dinner before I finally understood. They never really wanted me. They just wanted what I brought with me. The first time Nicole asked me not to cook, she smiled sweetly. "You've done enough, Margaret," she said, taking the stew pot from my hands. "Relax. Be our guest." Sounded kind, and for a second I almost believed it. But I saw the wrinkle of her nose at the onions, the quick glance at Daniel, waiting for his approval. He gave it. "Yeah, Mom. Sit down. You don't need to wear yourself out." So I sat, my hands folding and unfolding in my lap while Nicole slid a frozen lasagna into the oven and called it dinner. The boys cheered. Ryan because it meant no vegetables. Luke because he loved the cheese. Not one of them asked if I wanted a plate. No one even noticed when all I ate was a slice of bread. That's how it began, quiet, small. That was the trick of it. First it was meals. Then it was laundry. "Don't worry about it, Margaret. I'll take care of it," Nicole told me once, pulling the basket from my hands. But she didn't really take care of it. She let it sit until she had a free moment, and then scolded me, gentle as if I were a child. "You should have reminded me," she said. Then came the living room. I used to sit there in the evenings reading quietly while they watched TV. One night, I came back from the kitchen to find my chair shoved into the corner, piled high with laundry baskets. "Oh, sorry, Mom," Daniel said when he saw me pause. "It's just temporary." But the baskets never moved. My chair stayed there. Out of the way. My very presence turned into an inconvenience. My steps too slow, my voice too soft, my habits too old. "Don't leave your knitting here, Grandma," Luke muttered one afternoon, kicking my basket under the couch. "It looks messy." Ryan laughed. "Yeah, it's like we live in a retirement home." They thought it was hilarious. I smiled faintly because forcing a smile was easier than letting the tears fall. The worst part wasn't their words. It was Daniel's silence. My son, the one who once gripped my hand at every crosswalk, who called me mommy long after he should have outgrown it. He never defended me. When Nicole sighed about my smelly soups, he chuckled. When the boys mimicked the way I cleared my throat, he just shook his head and smiled. He wasn't cruel. He was worse. He was absent. I tried to reclaim little scraps of myself. One Sunday morning I baked cookies, filling the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon and butter, the way Frank always loved. When the family came down, Ryan picked one up, sniffed, and dropped it back onto the plate. "Too hard," he said. Nicole added, "Store-bought would have been fine, Margaret." And they laughed. I told myself it didn't matter, that at least I had my room. But even there, the walls began closing in. Nicole started stacking boxes in my closet. Daniel asked if they could move the treadmill into my corner. Luke sprawled across my bed with his sneakers on the quilt Frank's mother had sewn, playing games on his phone. When I asked him to stop, he smirked. "Chill, Grandma. It's just a bed." One night I found my cardigans and blouses on the floor. Clothes that had once been folded with care were shoved aside to make room for Nicole's coats. I stood there, clutching a wool sweater Frank used to say looked beautiful on me, and I realized I didn't own a thing here. Not space, not silence, not dignity. So I stopped asking. Stopped requesting rides to the store. Help with groceries, a quiet afternoon. Every request was met with sighs, rolled eyes, or a flat "not now, Margaret." I swallowed the words until I became what they wanted. Invisible. But invisibility has a cost. When they forgot my birthday, I stayed quiet. When they left for vacation without even asking if I wanted to come, I just waved from the porch. When Nicole complained to a friend on the phone about having an old person underfoot, I didn't confront her. I just sat by the window knitting scarves no one would ever wear, letting her words settle in me like stones. And still I lied to myself. I told myself they meant well, that grief had made us all bitter, more tired. I told myself Daniel loved me even if he never showed it. I told myself Ryan and Luke would remember one day how I once held them through tears. But the truth was simpler. They didn't see me anymore. I was a shadow, a relic, a burden they carried without thanks. It took me too long to realize silence doesn't protect you. It only teaches people how much they can take. By the time they threw my dinner in the trash, it wasn't the first insult. It was simply the last one I would ever accept. When the house quieted at night, voices muffled behind doors, the hallway clock ticking steady, I often spoke to Frank. Not aloud, my throat was too tired for that. But in the whispers of my heart. 5 years gone, and still I reached for his side of the bed. Still expected to hear his cough before the kettle boiled. He would have known what to say. He always did. When Daniel came home crying as a boy because older kids teased him, Frank sat him down and said, "Son, people only laugh at you if you let them." When I burned our first Thanksgiving turkey, he kissed my cheek and said, "Doesn't matter, Maggie. You're the feast." Frank had a way of making dignity feel natural, never something you had to defend. But without him I had shrunk. Not just in body, though age had made me smaller, but in spirit. Each careless word, each small dismissal pressed me lower, until silence became habit, then prison. At night I'd pull out the old photo album. Nicole kept threatening to digitize it. She said it like a kindness, but I knew what she meant. Out of sight, out of mind. Those pages held everything. Daniel's first day of school with Frank crouched beside him, tying his shoelaces. My mother, apron stained with flour, holding a cherry pie like it was treasure. The little house Frank and I bought with savings from his factory job and my sewing. Our first kingdom. I can still smell the lilacs Frank planted by the porch. every nail hammered into its walls, every bill paid with sweat and sacrifice. When Frank died, everyone assumed I'd sell it. Too much upkeep for you alone, Daniel said. But I didn't. Not at first. I kept it, dusted it, spoke to the walls like they were listening, until the loneliness grew louder than the silence. Daniel's offer, "Move in, Mom. We'll take care of you," sounded like salvation. I still remember the day I handed him the keys. He didn't look surprised, only relieved. "You won't regret this," he said. But regret had already taken root. Because I knew something he didn't. The deed was still mine. I tucked those papers away in an envelope, hidden deep in a drawer. Insurance, I thought. A lifeline if I ever needed it. Now, sitting in the room Nicole called the guest room, Frank's voice was the only one I trusted. "Don't let them take what's yours, Maggie," he would have said. "Not the house, not your pride." I ran my hand over the quilt his mother had stitched, its corners sagging now. Every square a prayer. Every stitch a memory of steadier hands. I thought of Nicole's coats in my closet, Ryan's sneakers on this quilt, and the way none of them seemed to notice the insult. That's when I understood something sharp and final. Love without respect is just dependency. They didn't love me. They only needed what I carried, my pension, my patience, my silence. But silence has an end. I folded the quilt carefully, smoothing the creases like preparing it for a journey. My fingers brushed Frank's face in the photo by my bed. "I've been patient long enough," I whispered, in a voice heavier than shouting. For years I'd begged quietly for scraps of kindness. Thank you. A hug. A place at the table. When none came, I told myself maybe tomorrow. But Frank's eyes in that photograph told me the truth I'd avoided. Tomorrow never comes for those who don't claim it. That night I didn't pray for patience. I prayed for strength. Strength to remind them who I am. Strength to stop being their afterthought. Strength to carry Frank's lesson one last time. People only laugh at you if you let them. And I had let them long enough. The papers in that envelope weren't just documents anymore. They were my voice sharpened after years of being ignored. They were my way of standing tall, even though my back had begun to bend with age. And when I closed my eyes that night, I could almost hear Frank's low chuckle, steady and sure, as if he were right beside me. "That's my Maggie," he said in my mind. And for the first time in years I actually believed him. It was a Tuesday evening, though the day itself didn't matter. I was at the sink rinsing the teacup I'd used all afternoon when Nicole's voice drifted in from the hallway. Sharp, hushed, meant for Daniel but pitched just enough for me to catch. "I swear she makes the whole place smell like mothballs." Even the boys noticed. There was a pause. Then I heard that sigh I knew too well. Daniel's sigh, the one that meant he wouldn't push back. "She's old, Nicole. What do you expect?" Those words weren't cruel. That was what made them worse. Cruelty at least carries heat. This was indifference. And indifference is colder than ice. I kept my hands under the hot water too long, burning them slightly, just enough to hold steady. Then I dried the cup, set it in the rack and walked to my room without a sound. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the quilt folded neatly at the foot. At first my mind was blank. Then it filled with a flood of little humiliations. Nicole wrinkling her nose when I opened a jar of pickles. Ryan flapping his hands dramatically after I sprayed my rose perfume. Luke muttering to a friend, "Don't come over. It smells like Grandma's house." Each time I told myself it didn't matter. That I was too old to care about such pettiness. But hearing it now, plain and unvarnished, stripped away my excuses. I wasn't a guest in this house. I was an intrusion. Later that evening when I came down for a glass of water, Nicole was in the kitchen rearranging the pantry. My tea tins were shoved to the back, hidden behind boxes of instant noodles and bags of chips. "Oh, Margaret," she said without even glancing up. "I moved some things around. Easier for us if the everyday stuff is in front." I nodded. What else was there to say? I slid the kettle closer to the stove, but she reached past me and pushed it back. "Let's keep the counters clear." Her smile was polite, practiced, the kind you give to a stranger you never plan to see again. That night, lying awake, I thought of Frank. He used to love the way our house smelled. Onions frying, laundry soap drifting in from the line, lavender tucked into dresser drawers. "Smells like home," he'd say, leaning back in his chair. And here I was now, being told my very existence smelled wrong. I didn't cry. Not anymore. Those tears dried out of me years ago. Instead, I reached into my nightstand and pulled out the envelope with the deed. The paper was cool and solid in my hands, reassuring. They thought I was powerless. They thought age had made me weak, forgetful, dull. But weakness isn't forgetting who you are. Weakness is letting other people convince you that you don't matter. I mattered. This paper proved it. As the house settled into silence, I slipped the envelope back into the drawer, smoothed the quilt and lay down. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I'll take another step. They laughed at the idea of me, dismissed me as a smell, a shadow. But shadows, when they rise, can block out the sun. The grocery store had always been my place. I knew its aisles like old friends, the spot where the best apples were stacked, the butcher who cut beef just the way Frank liked, the bottom shelf where flour was always cheaper. For years, shopping was my love language. Feeding my family was never just about food, it was about presence. About saying without words, I am here for you. So when Nicole handed me the list that Saturday morning, I didn't argue. I slipped on my sweater, buttoned up to the throat against the early chill, and walked the half-mile to the store. The boys had the car. Daniel was busy. Nicole didn't bother to offer me a ride. She just said, "We're out of milk. And get the multigrain bread this time, not the plain white." I filled the cart slowly, choosing carefully as I always had. Carrots with their green tops still on. A cut of beef with marbling that promised tenderness. The exact tea bags Daniel once begged for as a boy. By the time I reached the checkout, my back ached, but I didn't mind. Providing still felt like purpose, even if no one thanked me anymore. When I got home, my arms heavy with bags, I found them in the kitchen. Nicole leaned against the counter, scrolling her phone. Ryan and Luke sat on stools, eating potato chips straight from the bag. They barely looked up when I walked in. "Oh, good," Nicole said, barely glancing. "Did you get the bread I asked for?" "Yes," I said, setting it down. She picked it up, frowned, and shook her head. "This is the wrong brand." I said, "The seeded multigrain, Margaret. This one's too soft. The boys don't like it." Ryan snorted. "Yeah, Grandma. This is like cafeteria bread." I looked at the loaf, the one I'd chosen because it reminded me of the kind Frank used to butter thick on Sundays. Words gathered in my throat, then dissolved. I said nothing. Nicole sighed, tossing it aside. "I'll pick up the right one later. Next time, just call me if you're not sure." Next time. As if the hours leaning on that cart, the ache in my knees, the thought I put into each item, none of it mattered. I unpacked the rest of the groceries in silence. No one offered to help. The boys went back to their chips. Nicole went back to her phone. That evening, as I boiled potatoes and browned the beef for stew, Ryan wandered in. He lifted the lid, wrinkled his nose. "It smells old," he said. "Old?" I asked. "Like, grandma food." He laughed, called for Luke, who came running to sniff. Both of them doubled over with laughter. Nicole appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "Boys, that's enough." But she was smiling too. Daniel wasn't home yet, but I knew what he would do. Shake his head, chuckle quietly, say nothing. Always nothing. I stirred the stew with the spoon heavy in my hand. For a moment I imagined slamming it down. I imagined raising my voice until they froze. But instead I ladled out a taste, sipped, and said, "It needs more salt." Later, when we sat at the table, Nicole slid my dish aside and placed a stack of takeout containers in the center. "Thai food tonight," she said brightly. "Just in case." They dug in, laughing, passing cartons back and forth, while my stew cooled untouched. I ate alone, spooning it into a small bowl and carrying it upstairs. In my room, I set it on the nightstand beside Frank's photo. The broth had gone tepid, the potatoes sunk to the bottom. Still, I lifted the spoon and ate slowly, quietly. Each bite tasted of surrender, but not forever. As I swallowed, I thought of the envelope in the drawer. The paper waiting patiently, sharp as a hidden blade. They didn't know. They couldn't even imagine. One day soon, I told myself, I would not drag groceries through this door. I would not be judged by the softness of bread or the smell of stew. One day soon, they would find out what it feels like to come home and discover their keys no longer fit. And when that day came, I would sit right here in this same chair, eating a meal I cooked for myself, seasoned not with salt but with freedom. The first time they forgot to call me for dinner, I thought it was a mistake. I heard their voices, the scrape of chairs, forks clattering on plates. But no one came to my door. I waited. Few minutes. Then longer. Finally, I walked down quietly, telling myself maybe they were distracted. Maybe Daniel thought Nicole had told me. Families forget. It happens. But when I reached the dining room, the truth was plain. They were all there. Daniel at the head of the table, Nicole beside him, Ryan and Luke halfway through their meals. Boxes of takeout spread across the table, steam curling from cartons of fried rice and noodles. No plate was set for me. "Grandma," Ryan said through a mouthful, "we didn't think you'd want this. Too spicy for you." Nicole dabbed her lips with a napkin. "We were going to save you a portion, Margaret. There's soup in the fridge." Soup in the fridge. Not at the table. Not with them. Daniel kept his eyes on his plate, chewing slowly. He didn't look up. Didn't say a word. I turned and went to the kitchen. Pulled out the soup. One of those cans with a pull tab, the kind I never would have bought for myself. I warmed it on the stove while their laughter spilled from the dining room. When it was hot enough, I carried the bowl upstairs. The sounds of their meal followed me. Chopsticks tapping, soda cans hissing, the boys shouting over a joke I wasn't meant to hear. In my room, I sat on the bed with the bowl cooling in my lap. Thin broth, soggy noodles, not a shred of care in it. I thought of the dinners I used to make. Roast slow-cooked until the meat fell apart, bread baked golden, pies cooling by the window. Those meals drew people together. These cartons only filled stomachs. I ate in silence, each spoonful heavy with the weight of being forgotten. It didn't stop there. The next week they did it again. This time I went down early, hoping to be included. But Nicole was already setting the table for 4. "Oh, Margaret," she said quickly. "I wasn't sure if you'd be hungry. We ordered Chinese again." Her smile was thin, apologetic. But she didn't add a plate. She didn't ask me to sit. I went back upstairs. By the 3rd time I understood. This wasn't an accident. It was easier without me. One less plate. One less chair. One less voice. They didn't have to say it. Every unopened invitation, every closed door, every takeout box without my name on it said enough. That night I carried a plate of crackers and cheese to my room and ate by the window, staring out at the streetlights flickering on. Across the road, Mrs. Jensen sat on her porch with her daughter and grandchildren, laughing, passing a bowl between them. I watched until the sky went black, my plate empty in my lap. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was used to eating alone. That food fills the stomach whether it's shared or not. But deep down I knew what had been stolen from me. It wasn't the meal that stung. It was the belonging. When I washed my dish and slipped it back into the cupboard, my eyes drifted toward the drawer where the envelope rested. I didn't feel anger then. Not yet. Only a steady, quiet certainty that my place in this family had been erased long before they stopped setting a plate for me. But the house still knew my name. The papers proved it. And one day they would too. I tried once more to talk to Daniel. It was late, the house dim, the boys upstairs with headphones clamped over their ears, Nicole tapping on her phone in the living room. I found him in the garage, bent over a stack of bills on the workbench. The light buzzed faintly overhead, shadows cutting lines across his face. For a moment he looked so much like Frank, same furrow in his brow when numbers didn't add up, that my heart almost softened. "Daniel," I said, my voice low but steady, "we need to talk." He looked up, startled, then forced a smile that never touched his eyes. "Hey, Mom. Everything okay?" No, everything wasn't okay. But old habits made me nod anyway. Then I tried again. "I feel like I don't belong here anymore. Meals, conversations, even birthdays. I don't know what I've done to make you keep me at a distance." He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, it's not like that. You're overthinking." "Am I?" My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the restraint it took to hold myself steady. "You sit at the table with your family while I eat soup upstairs. You let Nicole dismiss me with a smile. You let the boys mock me, and you never step in." Daniel sighed long and heavy, like I was the one dragging him down. "It's just complicated. Nicole's under stress. The boys are teenagers. You know how they are. I'm stuck in the middle. I don't want more conflict." Conflict? The word scraped my throat. Since when is asking to be treated like a person a conflict? He shifted uneasily. You have to understand, Mom. Things are different now. You live with us, but this is our household. Nicole has her way of doing things and I need to support her. That's marriage. And what about me? My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. Am I no one to you? Finally, he met my eyes so much like Frank's, yet empty in a way Frank's never were. You're my mother. Of course you are. But maybe, he trailed off, cleared his throat. Maybe you should ease back. Let us run things. Don't take it so personally. Ease back. The words fell like stones, as if existing, as if cooking a stew, as if wanting a seat at the table was pushing too hard. I straightened my shoulders. I gave up my home for you, Daniel. I trusted you. He winced as though the reminder cut him. Mom, you did the right thing. That house was too much for you. This is better, isn't it? Better. Alone in a lavender-scented room full of dust while laughter rose from downstairs. I didn't argue. What was the point? He had made his choice. Peace with Nicole over dignity for me. So I left him there, drowning in bills, silence, and sighs. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing louder than it should. In my room I closed the door carefully, sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. I had tried. I had asked for nothing but recognition. Even that was too much. The next morning Nicole avoided my eyes. Daniel left early. The boys brushed past me without a word. Life carried on as though that conversation had been wiped clean. But it hadn't. Not for me. For me it was carved deep. That evening, as I made myself tea, I opened the drawer and touched the envelope again. The paper inside was cool, solid, mine. I pressed it to my chest, listening to the steady beat of my heart. Daniel thought I had nothing left, that I was cornered, dependent, grateful for scraps. He thought wrong. If I was invisible to them, then invisibility could work for me. Quiet, deliberate, unseen. They wouldn't hear me shout. They wouldn't see me beg. They would only feel the ground shift beneath their feet when it was too late to stop it. That night I slept soundly for the first time in months, because I knew, sharper than grief, sharper than hunger, sharper than age, that I was done asking. From now on I would be the one giving answers. I woke before dawn, as I often did. The house was wrapped in silence. I moved slowly, letting the boards creak beneath my feet just enough to remind myself this place was still mine. The kitchen was dim, the clock above the stove ticking steadily, the sound of a house pretending it belonged to someone else. That morning I decided to try one last gesture. Not for them. For me. A reminder that I still had something to give, even if they no longer wanted it. I pulled out the recipe Frank had loved most. Roast chicken with rosemary and lemon. It wasn't written down. It lived in my bones. I peeled potatoes the way my mother taught me. Thin enough not to waste, thick enough to hold their shape. Garlic filled the air, warm and sharp, carrying me back to Sunday dinners when laughter had been real. When Daniel would lick the spoon before I swatted his hand away. By mid-afternoon the house smelled like home. My home. Not theirs. I set the table myself, pulled out the good plates Nicole kept hidden for special occasions. I ironed a tablecloth from the back of the closet, the one with faint wine stains from Christmases long gone. For the first time in years the dining room looked ready for family. When they came home, the boys from school, Nicole from errands, Daniel from work, they stopped in the doorway. What's all this? Daniel asked, uncertain. Dinner, I said simply, wiping my hands on a towel. A proper one. Sit down. Ryan sniffed the air. Smells heavy. Nicole smiled tightly. Margaret, you didn't have to. I wanted to, I interrupted, calm and steady. Now sit while it's hot. Reluctantly they did. I carved the chicken, passed slices with potatoes and carrots, poured gravy that shimmered in the light. For a moment, just a moment, it almost felt right. Daniel tasted a bite, chewed slowly, and gave me a small nod. It's good, Mom. But Nicole only picked at her plate. The boys pushed food around with their forks. The silence stretched thin, every clink of cutlery sharp. Finally Ryan broke it. Do we have to eat this? We already ordered Thai. Nicole laughed softly, smoothing the air. The boys aren't used to this kind of meal, Margaret. It's different for them. I watched as Luke slid his plate away, muttering, Nobody eats like this anymore. And then the sound I had dreaded. The scrape of chairs, the shuffle of plates lifted, carried not to the sink but to the trash. Ryan dropped the first piece of chicken in with a careless flick. Luke followed, giggling. Nicole sighed almost theatrically as if to say, "See? It's hard for me too." The smell of rosemary and lemon clung to the air as my dinner hit the garbage. Love turned into scraps among coffee grounds and wrappers. I stood there with the dish towel in my hand, silent. Daniel caught my eye. For a second I thought he might stop them. But he only rubbed his temples and said nothing. Always nothing. Laughter rose from the boys as they pulled cartons of noodles from the bag Nicole had set on the counter. She joined them, chopsticks clicking, her voice light and cheerful. I washed my hands in the sink, water running hot, steady, almost scalding. My reflection stared back at me in the window, pale but unbroken. That night, upstairs in my room, I sat with Frank's photograph in my hands. "You wouldn't have let this happen," I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew he hadn't needed to, because he had left me the strength to do it myself. I opened the drawer, pulled out the envelope and set it on the quilt. The paper inside had no warmth, but it held something stronger. Authority. They thought they had thrown away my dinner. They didn't know they had just thrown away their home. And soon enough I would remind them whose name was written in ink on these walls. I didn't storm out that night. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice. No, silence was sharper. They laughed downstairs, noodles and soda fizzing, while I folded the envelope into my handbag with steady hands. I had already decided. The next morning I left before sunrise. The street was quiet, mist clinging low over the lawns. My shoes tapped the pavement, my knees ached, but I didn't slow. The lawyer's office opened at 8. I was there by 7:30, sitting on the bench outside. The deed pressed to my palm like a heartbeat. Mr. Grayson looked surprised to see me so early. "Mrs. Harper," he said, ushering me inside. "Have you thought more about what we discussed?" "I don't need to think," I told him. My voice didn't shake. "I need papers drawn up. A formal eviction notice. 30 days. No loopholes." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll draft it today." "Not today," I corrected. "Now." Something in my tone must have told him I was serious, because he didn't argue. The typewriter clattered, his pen scratched, and an hour later the notice lay in front of me. Cold legal words, neat and final. Vacate the premises. Failure to comply will result in legal action. I signed with a hand that hadn't felt this firm in years. From there I went to the bank. The young clerk smiled politely until I explained what I wanted. "I'd like to remove my son's name from my accounts, effective immediately. And I want new checks issued in my name only." She blinked. "Mrs. Harper, are you certain?" "Yes," I said, leaning closer, lowering my voice. "Do it quickly. Don't call my house. Don't send a letter. Send everything here to the branch. I'll collect it myself." Her pen scratched across the form, and just like that, Daniel's quiet siphon of my funds ended. I walked out of the bank taller than I had in years. Every step home felt lighter, though I knew what waited for me inside: laughter, dismissal, the usual chorus of condescension. Let them. Folded in my bag was the end of their certainty. Nicole was in the kitchen fussing with coffee when I came in. She barely looked up. "Out for a walk?" "Yes," I answered, placing my bag on the counter. She didn't press. She never did. Upstairs, I set the envelope beside Frank's photograph. I didn't whisper to him this time. I didn't need to. His eyes seemed to already know. It wasn't anger that filled me anymore. It was clarity. They thought me a guest, a burden, a shadow at their table. But the truth was written in ink and sealed by law. This house was mine. And soon, very soon, they would learn what it felt like to be unwanted under their own roof. By Friday, the papers were ready. Mr. Grayson slid the folder across his desk with a kind of solemnity, as if he understood what this meant. The eviction notice sat on top, crisp, final, undeniable. "You don't have to serve it yourself," he said gently. "I can send a courier." I shook my head. "No. They'll hear it from me. My voice, not a stranger's." That evening I carried the folder home, pressed against my chest like a shield. Their cars filled the driveway: Nicole's polished SUV, Daniel's dented sedan, Ryan's beat-up hatchback. Through the windows light glowed warm. Television laughter spilled into the yard. To a passerby, it might have looked like a family. Inside, pizza boxes littered the counters. Soda cans sweated half empty on the coffee table. Ryan and Luke sprawled across the couch, controllers in hand. Nicole scrolled her phone. Daniel leaned back, pretending to relax, but his face was tired, worn. None of them noticed me until I stepped into the living room. Nicole looked up first. "Oh, Margaret, you're back early. We didn't think you'd want pizza. Too greasy for you." Ryan smirked. "Yeah, Grandma's probably upstairs with her soup." Their laughter echoed. Familiar, rehearsed. I didn't answer. I walked to the coffee table, set the folder down between the soda cans and greasy controllers, and stood tall. My hands didn't tremble. "What's this?" Daniel asked, frowning as he reached for it. "Read it," I said. He opened the folder. His face drained of color. "Mom, what is this supposed to mean?" Nicole leaned over his shoulder. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "An eviction notice? You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm serious." My voice was quiet, but the words cut sharp. "This is my house. My deed. My name on every brick. I let you live here. I let you pretend it was yours. That ends now." The boys paused their game, staring. Ryan laughed nervously. "Is this a joke?" "No." I looked at him evenly. "It's the opposite of a joke. It's the truth." Daniel shoved the papers back at me, his hands shaking. "Mom, you can't do this. We're your family." "I am well aware," I replied. "And for years I believed that meant I owed you everything. I gave you food, money, my silence. You repaid me with mockery, exclusion, indifference. You made me invisible in my own home. But invisible does not mean powerless." Nicole's voice snapped like glass. "This is ridiculous. Where would we even go? Do you want your grandsons out on the street?" "They are not children anymore," I said, steady. "They're young men who laughed as they threw my dinner into the trash. Let them laugh while they pack." Daniel's voice cracked, desperate. 30 days? That's not enough time." 30 days, I cut in, is more than enough. I have already spent years waiting for respect. That time is over." Silence spread through the room. The television buzzed, ignored. The boys shifted uneasily. For the first time I saw something on their faces, not guilt, not yet. Shock. The first tremor of fear. I picked up the folder, tucked it under my arm. "You'll each receive a copy tomorrow. Signed and filed. I suggest you begin planning." Then I turned and walked toward the stairs. My steps were slow but steady. No one stopped me. No one dared. Upstairs, I set the papers beside Frank's photo. His smile looked different tonight. Approving. Proud. Downstairs, voices rose, frantic, sharp, overlapping. I didn't listen. I poured tea, let the steam curl upward, and sat quietly with the weight of decision settling into me. For the first time in years, the house was mine again. Not because they were gone, but because I had spoken in a voice they could no longer ignore. 30 days. A month. Enough time for them to learn what it means when the person you thought powerless decides she will no longer bow her head. This was a man who had chosen silence over loyalty, comfort over courage. When Daniel left my room, the door clicked shut softly. Not a slam. Not yet. That night I heard their voices carrying up from downstairs, low, urgent, frayed with panic. Nicole's sharper than usual, Ryan's raised in protest, Luke's muttering complaints. Daniel, as always, said the least. I sat upstairs with my tea, listening not for words but for the sound of their unease. It struck me as strange. For years I had been the quiet one, excluded from their laughter, their meals, their plans. And now, with a single sheet of paper, the roles had flipped. They whispered about me, plotted around me, argued because of me. I was no longer invisible. Later, when the house grew still, I stood at the window. Outside, the lilac bush Frank had planted so long ago bloomed stubbornly against the fence. Its fragrance steadied me. This was my garden, my home, my life. And I had taken it back. They would pack. They would bargain and blame. But these walls would remember who they belonged to. Respect is never handed out freely. It is claimed. And in 30 days' time, I would sit at this very window unbowed, and know I had done what Frank would have wanted. I had stood tall. For once it was their turn to feel small. The days that followed swelled with slammed doors and muffled arguments. Nicole's voice cut sharpest, slicing through the walls like glass. How can she do this after everything we've done for her? She demanded. Everything. As though letting me sit upstairs with canned soup was a gift. As though mockery and silence were kindness. Ryan and Luke stomped through the halls with the graceless anger of youth, muttering about unfairness, about crazy old ladies. I heard Luke on the phone one evening. Yeah, we're getting kicked out of our own house. My grandma's nuts. He said it like a joke, but I heard the crack in his voice. Daniel was quieter than them all. His steps dragged, his sighs heavier. He avoided my eyes when we passed in the hall. For that, I nearly pitied him. Nearly. On the fourth day, Nicole cornered me in the kitchen, blocking the doorway, arms folded tight. Her face was drawn, fury barely hidden behind a brittle smile. Margaret, this has gone far enough, she snapped. You can't just toss us out. The boys need stability. I spread jam over my toast. Calm. Steady. They'll find it elsewhere. She laughed bitterly. You're punishing us because you feel what? Left out. Families are messy. That's life. You don't get to bulldoze us because you didn't like a few dinners. I set the knife down, met her eyes squarely. You call it a few dinners. I call it years of being treated like furniture. A nuisance, a shadow in my own home. This house is mine, Nicole. You were a guest. And you forgot that. Her mouth opened, then closed. For once she had no answer. She spun away, muttering about lawyers, about rights. But I knew better. Mr. Grayson had made those papers airtight. Their arguments were smoke against stone. That evening Daniel came to my room. Shoulders slumped, hands in his pockets, looking like a boy about to confess a lie. Mom, he said quietly, I've been looking at rentals. It's not easy. Everything's expensive. I nodded. It usually is. Is there really no other way? His voice cracked. I studied his face. My son. My blood. The boy who once clutched my hand so tightly. The man who had let me vanish in his own home. My heart softened, but only for a beat. Then it hardened again, cooling like steel after fire. No, Daniel. There isn't. His eyes dropped to the floor. He nodded once and left. The house shifted after that. Boxes appeared in corners. Nicole's shoes stacked near the door. Ryan's posters rolled tight. Luke's books clumsily piled. I moved through it all like a shadow, the reverse of the ghost they had made me. I was not invisible anymore. I was the gravity pulling them out. At night, I looked at Frank's photograph. His eyes seemed to hold mine longer, steady, approving. Almost done, I whispered. And for the first time in years, I slept without dreams of slammed doors or laughter at my expense. Only lilacs in bloom. Only freedom. The 30th day came without spectacle. No shouting match, no apology offered too late. Just walls stripped bare. Closets emptied, voices thin with exhaustion. I sat at the kitchen table with tea while they carried box after box through the rooms that had never really belonged to them. Ryan muttered as he hauled his sneakers and video games. Luke dragged a suitcase that banged every stair. Nicole barked orders, her eyes red. Daniel said little, his face drawn gray. I didn't gloat. I didn't interfere. I simply watched them fade. Daniel paused once in the doorway. His mouth opened as if to speak. For a heartbeat I saw the boy he had been. The boy with scraped knees. The boy who clutched me at Frank's funeral. But the man standing there had chosen silence too many times. Whatever words he searched for, they didn't come. He lowered his eyes and carried the last box outside. When the door closed behind them, the house exhaled. The silence was not heavy now, it was clean. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, the banister, the worn dining table. This was not emptiness. It was mine again. Every nail. Every memory. In the living room I found one of their soda cans left behind. Half empty and flat. I carried it to the trash and let it drop. The sound of metal hitting the bin rang sharp, final, almost sweet. Then I opened the windows. Fresh air swept in, carrying the scent of Frank's lilacs. That evening I cooked, not for them, not to prove a thing, but for myself. A small roast, potatoes, carrots, rosemary from the garden. I set one place at the table, lit a single candle and ate slowly, savoring each bite. They had lost a roof, yes. But more than that, they had lost me. My patience. My silence. my care. And they would learn too late what it meant to live without those things. When the dishes were washed and put away, I stood at the window. The street was calm, the lilacs glowing pale in the moonlight. I breathed deeply, steady, sure. They had laughed while they threw my dinner in the trash. They had made me invisible. But I had answered. Not with shouting, not with vengeance, but with law, with dignity, with strength they never believed I had. And now this house was mine. Not just on paper. In truth. In spirit. I closed the curtains, whispered to the quiet, to Frank, to myself. Respect is never given. It is claimed. And that night I slept without fear of being forgotten.